Welcome to Defining Dad Bod, where my dad, Coach Alex Van Houten, plus his 14 years of experience to work for you. You should listen to him. Here's Pretty Beast Mode. Who knows who we could be if we could become 1% better every single day.
What's up, guys? This is Alex Van Houten with Defining Dad Bod. I hope you're doing super well. You're listening to Season 3, Episode 35 of Defining Dad Bod, where we're interviewing Dr. Skylar Pond. This episode's been brought to you by the Better Daily app. Work hard to become 1% better every single day, but don't do it alone. Our community just launched our new app for Apple devices and Android devices, and we think you're going to love it. Go to definingdadbod.com/betterdaily and type in coupon code DADBOD, all caps, to save 25% on your subscription. That's definingdadbod.com/betterdaily. The app's working great. We love it. Our community loves it, and we hope to see you there. I'm excited to bring this interview with Dr. Pond to you. He's a sports medicine chiropractor, a corrective exercise specialist like myself, a regenerative medicine specialist, a jiu-jitsu competitor, and the team physician for a professional MMA team in Seattle, Washington. Dr. Pond is the proud father of 2 teenage boys, and I sincerely enjoyed this conversation. We got into the psychology of injury, the importance of physical development, and the growth of manhood and masculinity, and he threw down some knowledge about preventing and recovering from injuries. This one really ran the gambit, and I know you'll find something valuable out of it. Before we get there, here's your food for thought. My food for thought for you today comes from a session I had with one of my clients this week. She's recovering from back surgery, which was the culmination of over a decade of a lack of self-care, exercise, and caring for ailing parents, which wore down the discs in her back and was causing continual pain. We've really made progress over the past few months, but in our session this week, she threw me for a loop. She said, "Hey Alex, I was watching some of your exercise videos and I saw you doing pull-ups. Can we try that beginner version today?" Mind you, my client's no spring chicken, and when we first started together, pull-ups weren't even on her radar. In fact, as she asked it, the look in her eyes and on her face even said, "I know you probably think this is a bad idea, and I'm probably going to suck at this." Imagine her surprise when my face lit up, and I almost shouted at her, "I'm so glad you asked. I can't wait to teach you this. Let's do it." I couldn't help it. I was stoked for her. You see, when you wrestle with something like a back injury, and you've been down and out for a while, it's easy to begin imagining your future as if it's way bigger than you, and that you're never going to grow. You're going to stay stuck in that same one place, wrestling with the same pain, day in and day out. However, what's powerful is in realizing that though there might be some burdens in your life that aren't going anywhere anytime soon, that there's still opportunity for growth elsewhere. And that's what she was doing. And so my client spent the next 30 minutes with me mastering the beginning steps of hanging her body from a pull-up bar with strength and endurance. She doesn't know this, but I took a video of her so that in a couple months I can show her how far she's come. My food for thought for you today is this. Do you have something in your heart and mind that's calling to you, that even though you'll probably suck at it, you gotta give it a shot? Can you picture that thing? It might be running or walking a distance or trail that you've never done before. It might be performing an exercise move, like a pull-up or a deadlift. It might be trying a new modality, like swimming or yoga. Or it might be asking a friend if you can join them for a workout class that you know they're a part of. Can you picture it? What would happen? What would happen if you gave yourself the permission to take a baby step in the direction of growth? I don't want to make any promises here, but I will say that it's very possible that a baby step like that could change everything. I know for my client this week, taking on a pull-up was a lot more than resolving to pull herself up over the bar. What more? Well, I guess we'll find out. I'd love to know your thoughts. Shoot me a message at coachal@definingdadbod.com. That's your food for thought today. I hope it gives you something to munch on. Now, without further ado, let's get to this awesome interview with Dr. Skylar Pond. What's up, guys? This is Alex Van Houten with Defining Dad Bod. I hope you're doing super well. I am joined by a brother from another mother, though he doesn't know it yet, Dr. Skylar Pond. How are you, brother?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me here today, Alex.
Yeah, man, and I appreciate you, and I appreciate your story, which we're going to get into in a second. But before we get there, I actually watched an interview with you on, I think, Seattle's Best, where you had competed on a TV show called The Broken Skull, which is like this insane competition where CrossFit meets grappling. Can you talk to me a little bit about that? This was like 4 or 5 years ago. You're doing exercises while getting tackled. So I need to hear a little bit about that, because I'm trying to get on the American Ninja Warrior, which is a TV show as well.
Yeah.
So I need to know, how'd you get on the show? What the heck happened? Why'd you do it? I would love to hear about that before we get into the meat of today.
Well, I appreciate that. That's a fun topic. I could use a little levity in the world right now. So let's get silly. Let's talk about wrestling hillbillies in the desert. So,
no joke.
And that's basically that's what that was all about. I was on that show twice. The first time was, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, and then they brought me back again for an All-Stars episode a couple of years after that. And I don't know how it happened. It was pretty arbitrary. I was competing in CrossFit and strongman and kettlebelling and stuff like that. That was my big passion and drive at that time. And apparently at the end of the show, it was on CMT. You got Steve Stone Cold Austin looks at the camera and says, "We're looking for the baddest sons of bitches in America. And if you think you got what it takes, sign up at, steveaustin.com," right? and a friend of mine and a coach of mine, in a great leap of faith, which I'll appreciate forever, just that, oh, well, that's Skylar. So she sent me the application, and I had never seen the show. I filled out the application in between patients. I just took it as, hey, that's a great compliment. Thank you. Yeah, I'll fill it out. Didn't think much of it. And I ended up getting a call back, talking to a couple of producers, and I have no background in wrestling. You know what I mean? It was just like a strange thing to sign up for, because it's really what it is it's like, do you remember American Gladiators back when we were kids? Like that space age kind of fighting show. It's like that, but just a hillbilly, functional strength version, where you're throwing tires and swinging sledgehammers and tackling each other, and you have all kinds of really cool primal physical challenges. Like one is like if you and I were competing against each other, we'd both hold ends of a looped rope. You hold one end and I hold the other, and they say go. It's like make Alex let go of that rope, and they say, Alex, make Skylar let go of that rope. And you just go and you just figure it out, It was absolute chaos, right?
Oh, man. You don't have that kind of fun as an adult. Like, it just doesn't happen.
It was absolutely, there are no rules. Everything's safe. It's fine. We're in a giant sandbox. We're out on Steve Austin's ranch, out in the desert. And it's just like, everything's going to be fine. Just go nuts. But I was just thinking more, this isn't really my thing. What if I break my arm? Even if I win, I lose. I got to take time off of my clinic to be there. I didn't really put my heart into the interview process, but when they didn't call me back, I got obsessed with how badly I had to be on the show, So that's how it goes, right? You want what you can't have.
Yep.
And I sent them ridiculous highlight videos. If you ever look up Skylar Pond on YouTube, there's a highlight video that my coach made for me of me doing all kinds of ridiculous things. I sent them that. I was texting these producers all day saying things like, you're looking for the baddest son of a bitch in America, and I'm the Michael Jordan of bad sons of bitches, and just saying nonsense, just spouting off nonsense.
Yeah.
And they brought me in, and they brought me in. We had a great time. It was way out of my comfort zone, and I was in that phase of my life where I wanted to do a lot of things outside of my comfort zone and see what it was like out there. I had a big temper tantrum when I had a very controversial decision on my episode. So they loved that, and they brought me back to kind of keep the heat going. But we're all on the same page. All these guys are all kind of in the same boat. Nobody's a professional run up a hill and tackle a guy. It's all kind of bravado and chest puffing, and it was just a ton of fun though.
Dude, it just sounds like so much fun.
What a weird opportunity. Such a fun thing for like my kids to watch,
Yes.
like that.
That's my dad.
It's just a nice weird story to tell, so I'm super glad I did it, but in no way is that my future. It's just a weird little blip in the past, but it's cool that you mentioned American Ninja Warrior. My main adversary on that show is named Mac, and he's known as the King of Obstacles. The King of Obstacles. He's been on American Ninja Warrior several times. He's this giant beefcake.
Yeah,
he's like the biggest, tannest, most muscliest guy you'll ever see on that show. Like, he shouldn't be able to hold himself up by his fingertips. But yeah, props to my big adversary, Big Mac. Probably not going to run into you again, but if so, we'll have another good battle.
Shout out to Mac.
Yeah.
Maybe someday soon you guys can duke it out if it ever comes to it.
I mean, that was a big turning point in my life. I went from that, and I decided, boy, I have to learn how to grapple. And I've always been the team physician for an MMA team here in Seattle, Ivan Salivary MMA. Props to ISMMA. And I began training there. They were teaching me, getting me ready for this, showdown sequel thing. And when that all left, I stuck with it. I've been competing in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for over 3 years now, and that's just the new unending puzzle that you always get to play with. And so I'm really glad I opened up that door, and it led to an interesting pathway that I'm still on today.
That's super cool. So that kind of brings me to your superhero origin story that will lead into our conversation today about growing confidence in our children in a way that's actually good for us too. So get stoked. But let's talk a little bit about how you got to where you are. You, as I understand you, and let me know if I misrepresent you here, you are a chiropractor who regularly sees patients in clinic. You work not only with the MMA studio that you're working with, but you also work with youth athletes, you work with adults, and your modus operandi, or one of the things you're really passionate about, is making sure that people are doing the things they love to do physically without injury. And so can you talk to me a little bit about how you got to doing what you're doing right now and why you still show up every day for it?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. I suppose I've tried to create the clinic that I couldn't find, right? I tried, in my experience as an athlete with my injury past, I was frustrated with the options I was presented with, and my wife and I, she's the acupuncturist here, and I'm the corrective exercise and chiro here. We built this place 12 years ago, just really with that in mind. What was the place that I wish I could have stepped into? And I had a dislocating shoulder and a torn rotator cuff and torn labrum. And that origin story wraps all the way back to in college. I got really distracted by how much I loved playing rugby, and I ended up taking a couple of years off from undergrad and kind of touring around and playing for teams on the East Coast and the West Coast and such. That all got compromised when I had a pretty common injury I see now, a big dislocation, subluxation of the shoulder from an overhead position coming around a set of cones. And that was the biggest impediment to my dreams in my life. I really wanted to play international. I just wanted to see how far I could go with that. But I was just told I needed surgery. I needed to stop playing. And I wasn't interested in either, as a otherwise healthy 21-year-old guy. I just wasn't accepting that. And I ended up exploring on my own all the overhead stability strategies. I've really been refined since then. This was, almost 20 years ago now. And I ended up recovering the shoulder stability, continuing to play, no longer having dislocation trouble with the right shoulder. But a little bit of the fire had changed. I was so excited about what I was able to accomplish with the shoulder that I decided I was more excited about fixing shoulders than I was about rugby at that point. And I ended up recommitting to my education, completing the undergrad, going on to the post-grad world. I chose the chiropractic side as opposed to the more medical options. I felt at that time that it gave me as much freedom as I wanted to design a protocol how I wanted to do so. And that's just where I had most of my experience. I don't know if you have a lot of experience with rugby people, but there's tons of chiropractors in that community. There are good schools in this country that give away scholarships to great rugby players. So the rugby community is very much infused with that manual therapy kind of a worldview. So that's really where the clinic moved to. Day one, that was our goal, to not give people the option of rest or give up. Like, okay, it's my job. I assume when you came in, you've already seen my website, you know what I do, you've already tried the basics. I have a very educated population of patients. The basics are kind of lost on them. They've already tried them, right? So it's my job to give you a quick reality check of, okay, you realize that rugby isn't really healthy for your shoulder, right? Like if you best for you, you'd probably hang up the boots and do Pilates. You realize that, right? Okay, we've checked that box. Now we understand our rules. My job is to help you reach your goal. My job is to help you to play your game to the best of your ability, to avoid the surgeries, to do everything I can. That's my job, to help you build strength is medicine, as we say. Try to build a robust threshold around whatever vulnerable joint that you have in order to mitigate your risks and improve your quality of life as you pursue your goals. So that's my job. First, I have to give a quick reality check, and then, all right, I'm all in. I'm not going to tell you that being a race car driver is dangerous. I'll tell you that once, and now I'm your pit crew. Let's go. Let's win.
Man, I love that.
Yeah.
That's such a cool origin story. You said something there that I'd like to point out and make sure our listeners hear. When it comes to physical prowess in a particular performance category, could be rugby, could be martial arts, could be broken sculling. Many of those things aren't easy on the body. And there's a difference between like regular health and fitness, exercise, discipline, practice, and that sort of thing. And then also competing in something that's difficult and injuries can occur and whatnot. So that brings me to an interesting question. I find in the CrossFit community, for instance, there are a lot of chiropractors who also go to CrossFit. At its core, though, you watch a CrossFit class. It's not exactly the lightest thing you can do to yourself. It's pretty rough. So question, as a chiropractor who came out of a rugby injury and somebody who's experienced a lot of physical intensity and whatnot, why do you engage in competitive activities like that you know could result in problems for you? And then how do you mitigate that risk for yourself?
Well, it's a great question. The fact is, that's so multifactorial, right? As you frame it that way, I want to say, well, it gives me a chance to test my BS. Yeah, are my strategies that I use to protect myself, are they effective? Do they work in the real world? But the fact is, I have an itch that needs scratched, though. I'm hard on myself. If I'm not pushing myself in places that are uncomfortable, I'm pretty judgmental. I'm pretty down. It's something I need for my emotional well-being, for one thing. I need to regularly stay in a growth place where it's like, well, grow or tap out when it comes to jujitsu, right? So you're forced to do that. But it is the laboratory. I've had nearly every injury any patient's ever brought to me. I was very competitive in CrossFit for almost a decade. I competed in the regionals. They used to be regionals. I competed in 7 years in a row. I've had every CrossFit injury that you can have. I've mitigated them. I've moved through it. And jiu-jitsu led to another kind of, birth story of sorts, where I had some ligaments torn in my knee in one of my first tournaments as a white belt. Medial collateral ligament, tore the meniscus. It was a pretty messy injury. It sounded like standing in shallow water in a river, like shin deep, and you hold a very large stone, you throw it, and it makes that plunk sound, right? That was the sound of my knee being compromised into a valgus strain. So yeah, it gives me the opportunity to explore from all the perspectives of my patient base. And that's what sent me down the rabbit hole of trying to stimulate tissue health and tissue regeneration. We did a lot of PRP on that knee injury. We did a lot of things and really figured out what's kind of the optimal way we can help the tissue itself, and then put that in the context of the greater terrain of our patient, what's going on with their health, what's going on with their nutrition, what's going on with their sleep, their gut biome. How can we build up patients to get that kind of high responder? That I'm the high responder, like, absolutely. When I put PRP in my knee, like, whoa, I don't need my crutches anymore. It was awesome. But it's like, okay, well, everyone's not going to get this exact situation. How can we figure out what are the commonalities between those who respond extremely well versus those who have more of a mild response? So that's how I justify it to my wife anyway.
This is field research, honey. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey,
I'm willing to put myself in there.
I have to test these concepts out. I learned so much through it. When I deal with a patient who has an injury that I've gotten through, my eyes light up. It's like, oh, it's actually your left knee, actually your MCL. Great, come here. Let me tell you some secrets.
Let me tell you, I've been there. Yeah.
Yeah. Forget about the clamshells; those don't work. Let's talk about these, and we'll get in there and all. And I feel like I'm letting somebody into my secret little club. I've been there. Let's talk about it. And it's so much different. I'm just so much better with every injury that I've had than ones that I've studied.
Yeah. Very well said. So I resonate with this deeply. My story, I have Ehlers-Danlos, hypermobility type. So I've wrestled in my life with ligaments and tendons that don't do their job correctly. So my joints do really fun things that they're not supposed to be able to do. And so I wrestle with that hypermobility in all of the things that I love, like martial arts or like powerlifting or running.
Absolutely.
So all the things that I love to do, and I've got two boys, I've got a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and wrestling around in the floor with them with hypermobile joints is its own brutal crucible, right? So many of the things that I've learned as a personal trainer and corrective exercise specialist have come through, been there, done that, actually. Like, I know what it feels like for sciatica to be a problem, even though that's something that, many people don't experience in their 30s. I do, but 50-year-old, 60-year-old people who are like, how do you know how I feel? You're a young gun. And I'm like, actually, let's talk, right? So I love that, though. And I love your heart and spirit behind that, because I feel you in that if I can't do the high intensity things that are enjoyable and interesting, I feel like a caged bird. So I could say it's market research for myself, wink, wink. But at the same time, if I was sitting twiddling my thumbs, doing all the safe things, I'd be going crazy inside somewhere. Like, there's a part of me that needs to run up a dang hill and lift something heavy and throw it.
Yeah. And I wonder where that came from. Was that part of your experience as a child?
That's a really good question. I believe, and actually this kind of leads to a conversation I'd love to have with you today. Personally, I believe it came from you could almost call it hyperactivity and the creative outlets that as a child there's not a lot of constructive ways to handle being overly energetic and daydreaming and thinking about a bunch of things all the time. I don't know about you, but public school was hell for me. Like, I got my work done and then got in trouble for throwing very fancy paper airplanes into the trash can, like across, because what else was I going to do?
Yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise I'm going to be jumping up and down on this desk doing backflips, like this is about as constructive as it gets. Lady, what do you want from me?
Yeah.
So I think part of that itch for me comes from learning that my physical activity can be an outlet for that energy and creativity and a way to experience the world. What about yourself?
Well, one thing I know about stress release is you can trick your body into thinking you've solved the problem. Whether you have a physical stress or an emotional stress or psychological stress, if you're stressed about, the bills that need paid or what have you, that will build up. Your body starts to produce fuel for immediate energy. Blood glucose is going to spike. Your heart rate's going to go up. Blood pressure is going up. And my perspective on that is your body's ramping up to take on the task. Like our old caveman body and systems saying, well, something must be wrong. There must not be resources in the area. What's going on here? How come we've had these elevations and cortisol for so long? And so we get kind of the thought that when we charge up the mountain, charge up the hill and just blow out all of our reserves, then your body feels like, well, we must have done it. We must have moved the village away from the flood. It's all, we addressed the problem. Of course, we didn't do anything to solve the actual problem that caused the stress, but it is a useful hack. I find that, there's a big difference between my mental state and my calm, the serenity perspective if I'm in a high intensity training phase and if I'm not. I think it's critical to nurture that from a young age. As you alluded to in the intro there, I began coaching youth rugby a few years ago, mostly just to try to discourage my kids from playing football, just because I didn't like the data I was seeing on that,
Sure.
And I was like, well, I know what you want. You want to tackle your friends and have fun. How about you pursue this for a couple of years? And if you still need to play some football, fine. But let's get the fundamentals of proper tackling while your face is vulnerable dialed for a couple of years.
Well said.
Yeah. And I realized while coaching my children, I had a lifetime of experience and I had confidence, but coaching the community, I realized if I couldn't help these kids become far stronger and more aware of their bodies, they were going to get hurt. It's simple in a contact, no pads game like rugby. There are going to be a few plays in the game where you're going to have a hammer and you're going to have a nail. And I wanted to make sure that the kids under my supervision had every opportunity to choose to be the hammer in those situations. So I ended up building kind of a youth strength and conditioning program through a website where you could follow what my kids are doing. You could do it with sandbag and body weight and things of that nature. And I thought that was kind of a critical survival tool back then. And that's what really got the momentum going. My boys are now 13 and 17 and we work out. We're bros. We trap slap each other and get ready to go for our sets. And we have a lovely relationship built around our quest for whatever's just out of reach, so we fail, we work hard, we get back up, we have no fear of failure together. It's a safe place to be a little bold. And I think there are a lot of good life lessons and all of that. Right now, I'd say it's more critical than ever. I don't know where things are at with your kids, but I'm in Seattle and our kids just are locked down. They're in remote learning and there's really no hope, no end in sight. By the looks of it, they're going to bring back like maybe the kindergartners and the first graders this year, but it's very possible that my senior in high school may never step back into school again.
Wow.
And this is a critical time for them to take control of their bodies, take control of their minds, create their own healthy, safe spaces. We began meditation training with them last week, like an intensive 4-day meditation. They're meditating a couple times a day. They're getting high intensity interval training in, heavy weightlifting. I kind of try to push them to be bold and take chances and get out of the house and go for a run on your own and run up a hill, explore something. Get dirt on your skin, like this is critical. This is a public health issue. If our generation of children who have been stuck indoors through formative, emotional and physical formative years, if they embrace this going forward, we're in a lot of trouble as a nation. If we don't have the skills and the values built around a healthy lifestyle, we're going to have more chronic disease. And if you have more chronic disease, you have more deaths when it comes to planet Earth, whether it's viruses or bacteria or what have you. If you don't understand, you don't value cultivating, creating your own vibrant, challenging physical culture, we're all going to suffer for that. We all need to come up together because obviously we don't live in bubbles, Yeah, I'm healthy. Yeah, my kids are healthy. Yeah, they'd be fine in a public school, but that's not good enough. Our community's not healthy. Our community's not strong and confident. You know, whether it's teachers or parents, there's just too much pushback of people terrified to leave their homes. So it's not good enough for me just to create my strong little tribe of children and we'll be safe and happy together. It's not good enough. We're at a point where we have to build our communities. We have to build our entire culture of strength and resilience, or else we're all stuck on the same level together. So there's beautiful opportunities for possibility for really reaching out to one another and advocating for one another and seeing our linked health are absolutely inseparable. You know, if a large part of my community is vulnerable, susceptible, they're going to be changing how our whole community behaves, and they're also going to be cranking out more viruses, and we're all vulnerable to one another right now. So I try to stay positive in regards to the tremendous frustrations I have. You can imagine having a senior in high school with aspirations of being a collegiate athlete who just, no, have a seat. You're not going to do that. Our community's not healthy. I am tremendously frustrated with the absolute dearth of information or people willing to step forward and fill that gap and say, okay, community, how can we get healthier? As a patriot, as a member of this society, as an American, you have a duty to build up your cardiovascular health. Every time you go out there and you breathe deep, you're taking in elements of your atmosphere, whether it's the COVID virus or it's something else. You're acclimating to your culture. You're building up your body's ability to live on planet Earth. The more tidal volume you get through your lungs, there just aren't enough voices out there really exploring how to build up our strength, resilience, and strategy to live successfully on this planet. We're stuck in hide, survive, and hope that Big Pharma is going to save your life. I have no confidence in that strategy.
I have zero. Negative.
And I feel very lucky that I have the kind of business and company this is built on health, built on resilience, built on endurance. I don't need to pivot and do anything. It just gives me another reason to get up earlier and fight harder and work better and grow, because my company is linked to the future of my children, the health of my community, the future of the planet. We're in this together now. We're doing a lot of work with outside of our normal demographic right now. We're working with senior citizens, older people who are super vulnerable, people who have knees that are too painful that they can't walk. You know, and it's like, well, you are absolutely vulnerable. You might not survive this knee injury. You know,
right.
I don't go fear and doom and gloom to the face of a patient, but I know what the stakes are in a situation like this.
Well, and when you believe it that deeply and you're speaking with a patient, they understand how much you care, even if it's unspoken, even if it's not like, hey, you really do need to get this under wraps because this knee injury could be, you know, the end of you eventually. if it's down in your bones like
that's in my head. It's one of the factors, but I always keep things on the positive side with patients. I've been in situations with medical consultations where I felt like I was being maybe manipulated by fear, and I did not appreciate it. And that doesn't happen in here. I'm not going to tell someone their spine's going to fall apart if they don't get adjusted 2 days a week. That doesn't happen in here. We talk about the potential that everybody has. If I find problems, it's like, wonderful. It's like you just came to your dentist for your first time and found out what dental floss is. Imagine how great you're going to feel after we take care of this for you.
Now,
you know?
You said some really deep and abiding things that are actually very related to this conversation I'd like to have with you about developing the psychosocial and physical aspect of not just childhood, but also adolescence. So there's a few threads I'd like to try to tie together here, and I might do a terrible job of it. So hang with me. All right. And I'm saying this to the audience as well. So
sure.
When you ask me where that itch comes from to scratch, so to speak, I grew up in a really poor household and in a single parent home, and I was the oldest of 4 kids. So for me, the common parlance is martial arts was an outlet, running was an outlet, you know, but it really did feel that way. There was a deep stress that, you know, had to find some way out, and constructively exercise was a deep part of that for me. Now, everybody's story is not the same, but it reminded me something of what I see in everybody's watching this show right now, Cobra Kai on Netflix. Have you seen the show?
Absolutely. That's a family classic in the Pond house.
Right. Yeah. So it's got the nostalgia.
I celebrate all 3 seasons.
There you go. I don't spoil it for me. I just finished season 2, so I've got one more. But so
one quick spoiler alert here. Okay. There is some karate and some face kicking.
There is. Yes.
So I don't know if you got to get the kids out of the room. There's going to be some karate.
Yeah, well said. And there's a little language too. So my 5-year-old who repeats everything he hears is currently not allowed to join me for Cobra Kai yet. But
As long as Sensei Lawrence is on screen, get the children out of the room.
done. Yeah,
He knows not what he does.
He's the blonde one. Just
yeah. So he's had a lot of sweet babes over the years.
That's right. It's sweet babes. And if you haven't watched Cobra Kai, you're not going to dig any of these inside jokes. So sorry. But anyway, that said, one of the things that they explore, one of the themes in the show, and this is true in my life, is the development of one's inner strength by developing one's outer strength, meaning that, the kid, he's a troubled teenager, he lives in a single parent home, he's getting picked on at school and stuff, and then suddenly he learns how to fight. And it's not easy. Like, there's the Rocky montage and everything, right? But he's got to do the push-ups, and he's got to get kicked in the face, and he's got to get beat up basically before finally, he stands up at school, whoops the bullies, gets the girl, and it kind of follows that story. And what's really wild about that to me is I've seen something similar in many of the guys that I coach in personal training. It's like somewhere deep down is this kid who never learned how to fight, or somewhere deep down is this adolescent who every time they get a little better at their deadlift, or every time, they get a little further on their pull-up, or every time they run a little farther, they're like, you know what? I didn't realize that I was made of sterner stuff than I knew. I didn't realize that part of me could see this through, that I could be disciplined, and that I could be consistent, and that when it sucks, I could still do it. I could still keep going. And something about exercise as a discipline, not just in adulthood, but in youth and in adolescence, something about exercise as a discipline. And it could be true for women. I've worked with a lot of women as well, but especially in the guys that I work with, there's something deep down that, like, if that part of you doesn't get trained, if that part of you doesn't get to come out, then you feel like something's missing. Mm-hmm. You feel like there's a gap there. So you're raising 2 young men.
Yes.
What's been your experience with the coming out or the waking up of the warrior, so to speak, through exercise?
So I pursue this both implicitly and explicitly with my children. Implicitly, I want them to realize on their own that working through discomfort pays off, that I want them to experience on their own an effort-reward relationship, right? Where putting in X hours, you get to come back and now you put 2 more pounds on. You feel that relationship and it builds. It's unavoidable. They understand it on their own. But I do explicitly connect those dots too. I train with my boys. We have this wonderful ritual we run it's about a 6-mile loop from our home. Up north and then down through this beautiful little park, Schmitz Park, down to Alki, and we jump in the water and we see who can stay in the water the longest, rinse off the sand and run back home up the hill. And we time each direction. And, with the endorphins flying, dad mode's on 100%, and I'll get real with them. And I'll just say, you realize, of course, that the lessons you're learning about your body apply to everything. There is an effort reward relationship in everything. And the first time you did this, it was scary. And now you have confidence with it. And this applies to everything. Please don't fail to connect these dots. I want them to be willing to be vulnerable and to be exposed and to do things that they know they're not good at, and to embrace the concept of getting the bad reps out of the way. Like, whether it's lifting weights or martial arts or drawing, singing, there's a requisite number of bad ones that you have to do, and you have to embrace that and don't feel ashamed of it, and don't feel the guilt. And I know that that's very real. I didn't do any martial arts of any sort until I was 39 years old, because that fear avoidance behavior. I had my friends in high school were on the high school wrestling team, and I wanted no part of wrestling with them because I just didn't want to be exposed as weak. So I'd rather just perpetuate my weakness than face it and grow it and grow strength upon it. And it was a big liberating moment for me when I finally stepped out there and realized it wasn't as scary as I thought. And it's no big deal. Of course, I don't know anything. Not supposed to. And I just share those experiences with the boys quite a bit. And it's important to me that they connect these dots together of that effort reward relationship, of being willing to fail, and the importance of that effort reward relationship is a lesson that I learned out of a parenting book as I saw it. Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, I thought was a parenting book. Remember that one in the math section where he was talking about how he was exploring the stereotypes of Asian countries have children that are better at math. And he explored that through these international standardized tests. And he confirmed it. It's like, well, that's true, but it's more subtle than that. It has far more to do with their agricultural model. So Asian countries that have a rice-based agricultural model were actually significantly better at math than the rest of the world. And the way that he established that was that there was a big section that you fill out before you take the exam where you tell all the details about your life and yourself. It has nothing to do with math because they're trying to determine what can we do to make people better at math. But it would take like 45 minutes. And the kids that would fill out that entire section, or the kids from the nation that fill out the most on this irrelevant section you won't be judged on, also scored the best in the math test. The children of the nations that skipped, that just like, oh, this isn't relevant, and skipped on and went on to the math, they scored the worst on a one-to-one basis. So what they deduced from that was it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you do on the test. We know how you're going to do on your math test based on how much of this busy work you're willing to do. So the concept was the rice farming cultures have a little rice paddy in their backyard. And the more time you spend in your rice paddy, the richer a farmer you are, as opposed to more of a Western agricultural model where it's all about big bank loan, big tractor, big acreage, big crops, wealthy farmer. So while trying to kind of instill the values of work, reward relationship, effort relationship, I've found that just very simple barbell strengthening, whether it's a bench press, back squat, deadlift, what have you, is the cleanest, simplest way to instill that. I thought about, instead of giving them a $20 allowance a week, like throw a sack of pennies in the yard, have them pick up one at a time to do that. But I didn't go that far. Because if they didn't get all the pennies, imagine the carnage when you mow the lawn, right?
Right.
I liked that idea. Like, are you willing to bend over and pick it up? And that's kind of instilling that mathematical mind. But I see it. I hope that it translates. It's all going to be their process, but that is how I set them up to make the conversion from straight physical strength bro skills to real life warrior kind of skills. Right. Yeah.
So I do a lot of consultations in interviews with men, specifically talking about their exercise history and their athletic background and that sort of thing. It's amazing to me how many men will talk more about their coach back in high school or whatever, about how that person influenced them than they will about their dad, which is very interesting to me. Because what's really interesting about a coach is they are the person who, in your eyes, in whatever it is they're coaching you in, they know everything. You listen to coach. You do what coach says. It's like Sensei Lawrence, right? Sensei Lawrence knows best. You do what Sensei Lawrence says. Yeah. And unbeknownst to the kids in Cobra Kai, Sensei Lawrence has a lot to learn about, life.
Yeah.
and he's still developing.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting about the fatherhood process and the process of learning new physical things and whatnot is your kids getting to see you fail, like not know everything, and how you deal with that. Because what's cool about the physical process is we have limitations. Like, we are a limited being, and maybe I'm really good in X vein. I don't know, running up hills, hiking, ninja warrior. Like, I'm cool in those veins. But if you put me in a kettlebell strongman competition, then you would watch me fail pretty hard. And how do I deal with that? Am I frustrated? Do I come back to the plate? Do I hit my training a little harder? Or do I cry about it? Do I get, pissed off and create good TV? Like, what does all that look like? And what's really powerful about the physical process with kids is they get to watch you as somebody who knows quite a bit, but also as somebody who meets up against their limitations. And then how do you deal with that? With humor or gusto or discipline or consistency or denial, all of the things, right?
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting corollary in my mind when I'm watching this Cobra Kai show, and I know, like, it's TV, it's not real, but at the same time, there's a real story there about seeing somebody fail who you thought had all the answers, and still learning from that process, because ultimately it's one thing to master a skill. It's another thing to master this overarching skill in life of dealing with sucking for a little bit before you get good at something.
Yeah. And I try to instill that concept with that simple phrase of there are no adults in the world. As a child, you think that we've got all this figured out. We're finished products. There are boundaries that can't be crossed because the adults have sorted this all out. And it's just absolutely not true. And I try to remain vulnerable in front of my kids to to show that, right? Like this was a strange year, but it was a good year. It was a really good year. I learned how to play chess. I learned how to meditate consistently. I learned how to surf, and I had to do all these things by being a total beginner, willing to laugh at my own limitations right in front of my children, right? I had to do that, and that's part of it. And it's such a simple lesson to teach, but it's one that I take a lot of pride in and a lot of excitement with, because it's one I avoided for my whole life. I really only wanted to stay in the realm of the things that I was excellent at, that made me feel good. And just kind of cracking out of that the last 3.5 years has been a real joy, really an absolute exhilarating experience, and just kind of putting a new perspective on how I'm interacting with my family and my community, and just trying to really have perspective, take a big step back and try to remember that it can be your last year alive, and exactly how should you interact with your people right now with that in mind. What a fun way to look at your life, look at your day, look at your interactions with your kids. And that it gets me coming back to what you've been alluding to. And these are basically master skills, right? I don't have enough time to teach my children, my community, everything that I think I would like to. But if we can teach those master skills of learning the resilience and the kind of the humility, the willingness to laugh at yourself as you initiate the process of something new. And I guess it just takes it comes down to self-confidence, right? A child really has to believe in themselves. They really have to feel that they're more than their good test score or their great performance. They have to really believe that they have a sound foundation of love and support, and they're beyond their activities. They have intrinsic value. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and I love the notion of your internal thermostat, and trying to raise your internal thermostat basically by investing in yourself a little bit and expecting beyond survival, right? And there's so many ways to invest in yourself and raise that internal thermostat. In the context I was listening to, it's not really my path, but it was more in a religious context, and saying that, people change their behavior. They treat themselves far better after they adopt a new religion, because they've just kind of raised their thermostat. They just went from a 54 and they're like, wait a minute, I'm a son of God, like, hey, I should be eating better than this, that kind of concept. And it does spill over into those physical activities too. When you invest that time in your body and your mind, and your mobility and your strength and your meditation, whatever it is, you are building up that internal value of yourself. You're worth investing in further because you have so far. So I think that's a master skill that I'm really trying to evoke and reinforce with my community when I have the opportunity. And it really does come down to confidence, self-love, self-care, and being willing to expand and not cling to what you already have. And it's a lot easier said than done to build up somebody's self-confidence, and self-love. I mean, I've got as many unfortunate moments where I get self-absorbed and, temper snap. I've got plenty of those, right? But I just try to keep my overall view and my focus back on what my highest goal is, and try to come back to that place whenever I see the opportunity to do so.
And kind of embodied in that is the idea that you can ask, and you can get in the habit of asking yourself internally, am I better than this? Can I be better than this? How do I get better than this? Or hey, you're better than this.
Yeah.
All of those internal messages. And I think you mentioned something earlier. I was talking about my childhood and how maybe that gave me an itch to scratch. There was a stress there. There's a biological process that creates kind of some built up energy, and exercise can be a great outlet for that. Right now, no matter where you came from, no matter what your childhood looks like, no matter how much money you have, whatever, right now, globally, the world is stressed. Like,
yes.
Everybody's got a pent up stress, anxiety, depression. Like, maybe you're wrestling with finances. Maybe somebody closed your gym, yes, and now you don't have barbells. maybe you're locked down. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're not locked down and you're wondering why everybody's freaking out. But either way, everybody is under we're all currently experiencing an uptick in the stress that we feel right now.
100%.
And what's powerful about what we're talking about here is it's not only an opportunity to maybe change the way you've done things for a time. As you said, this year gave you some perspective that you appreciated, but also very practically, this is a great time for everybody to be moving. This is a great time for everybody to get out and go for a walk. It's a great time for everybody to,
it's critical.
I don't know, have a dance party in your living room, like it's a great time for everybody to find a physically powerful outlet that may or may not lead to some discipline for betterment, to exude some of that stress and whatnot. And as I hear you speaking, I'm thinking about the internal process of, can I be better than this? Am I better than this? And I think it's something that we all get to ask ourselves right now and maybe come up with an answer. You don't have to change everything, just change a little thing. And you mentioned how that affects our community as well. I'd love to talk a little bit about how, as your boys are growing and whatnot, you've gotten to learn a lot about, as a chiropractor and as a dad and as a rugby coach, what kids can and can't take healthfully from an exercise perspective. Like really young kids, for instance, don't do the same, and their bodies don't quite adapt the same as a 17-year-old boy, right? So in your mind, how does that progress for a child? Because I have a lot of dads listening, I have a lot of moms listening right now who are like, yes, okay, I want to help my kid get active. How do I encourage them to get started, and what should I encourage them in? Do they need to be doing the same workouts as me? I've heard some of this is dangerous, that sort of thing. So how do you generally advise parents when they're bringing their kids to you and trying to avoid injuries and whatnot?
I put this into several different camps or clusters. In that whole prepubescent age, I am not as conservative as some. My children have been lifting heavy with me since their age about 9. We used to compete in father-son strength competitions.
Cool.
I do acknowledge that that's not for everyone, though. Through my experience of trying to do some online coaching and guidance for my child athletes, I realized that there's a critical threshold that must be met, and that's training to train. We have this kind of idealized, romanticized vision of how children move. And, if it wasn't for society and desks and all of this, we'd all be moving perfectly. Our feet would splay out. Our posture would be that of a dancer. We'd squat and rise all the way to the ground. Next time you have the opportunity, tell an untrained kid to squat and rise for you and watch the absolute train wreck that unfolds before you. Their hips just drop to the ground. They come up on their toes, their knees slam together, they're around their back. That is the number one most important reason why children should be training from a young age, to take ownership and understanding of your basic fundamental movement motor patterns. They don't have to understand leverage, fulcrum, pulleys, anything like this. They just have to move that way. If you can get them to a place where their squat and rise, their hinge, their deadlift is all maximized as far as leverage and efficiency is concerned, you're setting them up for a lifetime that will go a different direction than the people who end up in my office looking for an alternative to knee and hip replacements.
Can I pause you right there real quick?
Sure.
Just some of our audiences go like, oh, okay, that sounds really good. And I'll just use a quick example to make that real to them. So if I have a 5-year-old, if I told Gabriel, hey, I want you to squat down and stand back up, and he squats down and he stands back up, right? But if I look at him and I say, hey, keep your head and chest up and drop your shoulders a little bit and try that again. The skill of being able to keep your head up, drop your shoulders, and to do the same movement again, even that connection of knowing what that even means, of being aware of where your head is and being aware of where your shoulders are and being able to incorporate that in a movement. I have to teach people that after they've lived for 50 or 60 years and have never figured out how to connect those two things. Not necessarily just the squat, just like, what do you mean keep my shoulders out of my ears? What's that like? I'm like, dude, no wonder your back hurts. Like, if I did this for 50 years, my back would hurt too.
Absolutely. And I experience that every day. I don't have chronic pain. I don't have issues that pop up between my injuries. But I realize that it's only because I'm moving in a way that avoids them. When I show a patient how they just moved, I say, okay, well, this is kind of the optimal way. This is how you moved when you went to pick that up. I feel ping in my hip and in my back almost every time. Like, oh my goodness, I'm just as injured as you are. I just have a kind of a movement patch I put on top of it, so it doesn't matter at all, right? I never experience the limitation or the discomfort of a 42-year-old body just because I move around it, and I just move in a way that's extremely efficient. And a couple things that you mentioned, talking to an adult about bring your chin back, things of this nature. About 50% of kids that I work with, and a smaller percent of adults, but it's still there, honestly have no idea how to move their lower back independent of the rest of their body, right? So I'll ask them to do a good morning, hinge forward, don't let your spine move. And they will absolutely have 16 degrees of flexion right there from S1 to L1. And they have no idea it's there. I have to put a dowel on their back and videotape it and say, look at that. Like, you don't know where your spine is in place. And here, let's introduce you to your body. It's back there. You don't get to see it, but without that cue, it's just not there. And I see that with a lot of children. And some children, it's a long process just to get them to the place where they know what it feels like, without being told by me, what it feels like to have their spine in neutral position while they hinge. And it's a huge challenge that led to me dropping all strength components of my youth online programs, where it was like, I'm just not in a position to trust your parents to handle this. You know, it's really for that age group. If you're going to go into strength and that kind of like I did, I was bold, you know, they had their home physician and strength coach. So I felt emboldened to be far more aggressive. But if you are that person, if you are strength training with your child, I think those are the only people who it's safe and reasonable to actually strength train children of that age. If you're doing it with them, they have an on-site coach cueing all the movements. I thought of something as you were talking there. It reminds me the concept of learning how to move as though you're going to be lifting maximal weight all the time. Children don't have to do that, right? Their joints are made of smiles, sunshine. They can just drop to the ground and stand back up. You know, they don't care. So there's no feedback loop that would guide them to moving in an optimized way, right? And I had an interesting thought as you were talking. Teaching a child to move as though they're a power lifter is similar to that E-myth concept of structuring any company, whether it's a lemonade stand or window washing company, structure it from day one to handle a multi-site corporate volume, right? You have to, if you start systemized with your company and you have room for infinite growth, well, you're going to have a different outcome than if you're just kind of throwing dollar bills in your pockets. And this is kind of a similar concept for the physical body, moving as though you're going to be lifting 700 pounds. When you bend over to tie your shoe, just leaves open that capacity for that movement system overall. So I think that's the biggest opportunity. And that's why I'm an advocate of every child learning strength training at any age. And then you have to pick and choose which of these kids you're actually going to allow to load. The research is sound. The research is solid that children thrive when they lift very heavy. The myths associated with arthritis or stunting height just don't stand up to science. That's not my concern. My concern is I only want to strengthen optimal movement. I only want to reinforce optimal movement. So if you have a unicorn of a child who just naturally moves great and watches a video and away they go, maybe you could have someone kind of unsupervised going that direction. That would not be common though. I think you just have to focus on perfect movement and only load that child if they've got their coach parents in the room.
Well said. Now, if let's say a child doesn't have that, they don't have access to a coach, maybe their parents not very well versed in weight training and whatnot, what exercise modalities have you generally recommended to kids who don't have the outlet of strength training necessarily?
Well, some things are a little bit more intuitive. More like sandbag training. The form is a little more intuitive. It's okay to round your back into it. You kind of brace it into the belly if you're lifting like a large stone or something of that nature. So it's more or less like farm strength you want to build up in that context, right? There isn't like a perfect technique for putting a 35-pound sandbag on one shoulder and walking up that hill and back. You kind of figure it out and you work with your body. And I think there are less rules when it comes to those really functional, awkward kinds of movements. I like sleds for kids. My kids live in a strange world where having multiple squat racks and sleds and jerk blocks and everything is just kind of what they do for fun. But that is the kind of thing that can also be kind of made up as you go along though,
Yeah.
High school kids can be pushing the family's Honda Civic up and down the block, doesn't have to be in the paradigm of Olympic lifting, weightlifting, or kettlebelling to load the spine and get the super compensation effect you're trying to get. So that's one direction I could go in. But otherwise, it really doesn't even have to be weighted at all. Getting that metabolic conditioning kind of a concept is super fun. You can just go for one workout that I do with my kids is like 5 rounds of max push-ups, jog the alley back and forth, and you go to interesting places in your head. You're going to, it's like you get to that fight or flight mode where you're kind of gasping for air, and you realize, okay, I was a little stressed out about this. I kind of exercised some demons there. So I like high intensity interval training, body weight stuff, just throwing in simple running intervals. You know, it doesn't have to be Fran or anything like that by any means. You know, you can just take whatever a kid likes to do and just put it in a fun framework. I'll go with like 10-1. Okay, you like to do sit-ups, you like to do jumping jacks, great. 10 of each, 9 of each, 8 of each, come all down to 1, get it done as fast as you can, time it. You know, you can just blow out the speed on something like that. It's totally safe. We took away some of the risk factors, you know. Like with my kids, as confident as I am in them, they make me a little nervous. You know, like my 13-year-old's too dang strong. He's really strong. He's very committed. He'll do whatever I tell him to do. And I'm not comfortable with him deadlifting right now. It's just like, you know, the studies say it's fine. I've never seen any study of a 13-year-old with your strength to weight ratio, and we're not going to experiment here.
Yeah.
So yeah, so what I do in that context, we have a tempo fail. It's because, you know, I used to do, you know, it's like 5+, 5-3-1 training with them, and it would just go to failure, you know, and it worked. It was like a 12-minute workout, and it just took him to places they've never been. Now that's not the way we train with that guy. Once he loses that ideal tempo, if I've got him coming down at a 3 tempo and back up on a 1, if he slows down on the way up, the set's over. That's it. Yep. We're only going to get strong I'm not even waiting for form to break. I'm just waiting for tempo to break. I want his 5x5 to be clean, the exact same speed all the way through. And that's how I can kind of safeguard him away from his end range strength. And then I take those restrictions off once we get into the Metcon, the run to the beach. Man, we sell out on that thing. It's horrible, and he's always 2 steps in front of me. It's wonderful. Nice. yeah. So I don't know. I guess I was all over the place. Those are a few of my personal concepts that I'm interacting with through the development of my boys. I started off with them when they're 9 and 13, and now they're 13 and 17.
I love that. If you don't mind, I want to piggyback on that.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's get into it.
So if your children are pre-adolescent and you are well-versed in weight training, then with good coaching and good movements, one can teach a child to strength train well.
Yes.
And it's not the same sort of strength training. You're not trying to build muscle on a 9-year-old. They don't have a lot of growth hormone, a lot of testosterone. You're just teaching their body how to move with loads. And you're doing it intelligently, and as long as they're moving well, you'll avoid injury. Now, if you don't feel that confident, or there's not a coach available to work with your kiddo, then doing exercise without weights can still be a very powerful thing for them. And, for my boys, I've got a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. They help me with chores in the backyard. We just moved a bunch of bricks from one side of the yard to the other. And I've got my 2-year-old. He's got his little brick. And for a 2-year-old, a 5-pound brick is quite the obstacle to carry all the way across the yard.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's like, it's the cutest thing ever. He's like, I don't. I guess his brother made it sound hard, and so now he's doing it. And I've got the 5-year-old picking up bricks and putting them in the wheelbarrow, which is going from ground to chest. And after about 40 reps, he's in a great spot. And that's appropriate for children prepubescent.
Yeah, that's that farm strength we were talking about.
That's exactly right.
Yeah,
the movement, functional movement, just learning how to handle their body, learning how heavy things are, learning when they can't pick it up and they need dad's help, and how to tag team something. But then as children reach adolescence and they start getting that growth hormone, boys start getting that testosterone and whatnot, not only is the body well primed for strength training, but it's also a great time to teach their muscles how to move. And so if you do have kiddos who are in that age range, working with them from a body weight perspective, your yoga and martial arts, cardiovascular exercise, doing as many push-ups as you can and then running around the block, that's great. But it's also a good time to start getting into the discipline of weight training.
Yes.
And find them a place where they can practice that if they're not able to practice it with you. And maybe if you're a parent listening and you don't feel that confident about strength training, that's your cue that it's time for you to get on board as well. Some of the best clients I've ever had is when they're like, my daughter's 12. I want her to be active. She's starting to be interested in her body and stuff, and I think I need to get in shape too. I'm like, yeah, you do. All right, let's get you guys moving together. Like that's.
I think you're completely correct there. You start with the parent, make sure the parent knows what they're doing, and then you get all of that experience. That really, that's the treasure here. That's the gold. You guys are building together, and so it's such a fun way to interact with a teenage kid. There are awkward times where you just don't even really know what the heck you can talk about as they're changing rapidly and everything. And just to have that real simple interaction relationship that you can always come back to, you'll never regret it, and maybe a responsible way to go about it. If middle-aged parent comes to you wanting to get something like this going, which I'd highly recommend, they probably work with both of them for several sessions on the basic lifts, the ones that matter, the powerlifting basically. I don't know if you do any Olympic lifting with them. And then maybe they'd switch roles. You'd just be observing while they coach each other. They coach themselves through a couple sessions, and you could gauge if they're ready. The whole point of it would be for them to outgrow you for a strength cycle, and out they go and do a 6 to 8 week strength cycle and return, and maybe open up more skill sets to them. Like, okay, do you guys want to learn how to kettlebell snatch now? Do you want to learn how to clean and jerk now? I think there's tremendous possibility there for growth for a family, the relationships, the physical relationship, and that's probably the safest way to go about it as well.
Well said. So as we're coming up on our time here, I feel like I could talk to you for quite a while, but I want to make sure that we give us both the time we need to get to our next victims. Wink, wink.
Yeah, not far now.
But we've talked about quite a few things, and one of the undercurrent themes here, I taught my son, he's 5. I taught him how to read relatively young, and it's something that his mind was ready for. It's something that he's enjoyed, and it's because it's a gift that my mom gave me when I was a kid. And right now I get to, in my adulthood and even through adolescence, I've gotten to take for granted that I'm a good reader. I just read. I just pick up things and I read, and I have a good vocabulary, and it's not hard for me to process those things in my head.
Yeah.
What we're talking about here sounds very similar in that incorporating the ability to move and then the confidence that comes with it, so that in adulthood, you can almost take it for granted. Not that you do take it for granted, recognize it, be thankful for it and whatever. But if we can instill that in our children such that they grow up and they're confident, I feel like it's part of raising a generation who's in a better position to do better than even this generation. And that's personally my goal. And that's what Defining Dad Bod is all about. In your mind, when you're coaching these youth in rugby and you're working with your own kids and whatnot, is that also what's driving your confidence building and movement for them, or is it something else?
No, that's critical. That's what I was kind of alluding to, or trying to, with that kind of raising their internal thermostat, taking pride in their physicality and taking ownership of it. I just think it leads to a higher self-esteem. You're less reckless with yourself when you've invested in it, when you care about your physical body. Like they say, you can see a cat is doing well and it's well adapted in its scenario if it's cleaning its fur often, right? And children are just simple little animals, and if you can get them into the habit of investing in themselves physically like that, I think it really sets them up for making safe, responsible decisions for their life going forward. So that's a major part of this, and building up that confidence, as I was alluding to. It's bigger. It's really big right now. It's critical. We're at a moment where it's really important to make eye contact with people and to say hello. Say it from your chest. How are you? Because people, with all of the anxieties they have and the depressions that come up and the diminishing self-esteem that they have and all the self-doubt that they have, it just feeds the problems worse. And I see it, if you're on the sidewalk in my little neighborhood these days, 2/3 of people will kind of avoid eye contact and kind of hide behind the mask and do everything, and it's just a really important time to reach out, to build people up. And this is our smallest, most concentrated sphere of influence, what we can share with this next generation, with our children. This is where we have our biggest impact, and we don't want to leave any cards left on the table. We want to play every advantage we have to leave this planet better than we found it. And I think it's a critical tool to use everything you have to build these children up, to make them bold, loved, loving, confident, brave, courageous, willing to be wrong, willing to sacrifice, willing to step outside of themselves. And this is just a simple, sweet ritual, the strength training that feeds into that for my family.
Man, let me knuckle bump you across the U.S.
Let's go.
Thank you for your time, Skylar. It has been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been fun. I appreciate
what you're doing in the world. To my listeners, guys, this has been Alex Van Houten with Defining Dad Bod. Until next time, kick butt, take names. 1, 2, 3, 4. The free, practical advice and conversations here remain unbought and unbiased, thanks to the support of Better Daily. If this episode has been helpful to you, share it with someone in your life who you know it will benefit. Then, subscribe to the podcast and leave us a raving review to tell others what value Defining Dad Bod has brought to your health and fitness journey. Finally, if you're struggling for betterment, don't do it alone. We all have a cross to carry, and it's lighter when we do it together. Go to definingdadbod.com/betterdaily to get supported, challenged, and inspired to take yourself to the next level. Who knows who we could be if we could become 1% better every single day. Go to definingdadbod.com/betterdaily today. That's definingdadbod.com/betterdaily.